Hello there and a very warm welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I'm Victor Matthias. Now, just when Nigeria was breathing a sigh of relief after making a considerable level of success over Boko Haram insurgents in the northeastern part of the country, a notorious group of economic saboteurs, the Niger Delta Avengers, have been giving the Nigerian army a cause to worry about. On the program today, we will be beaming our searchlights on this group, their activities, demands, and the way forward. But before we get to that, it was a busy week for the social media circles in the past week, and here are some of the top trends that made it bubble. The football family was in mourning mood as one of its best, Nigeria's former captain and coach, Stephen Keshi, died at the age of 54. And 3 days after signing the condolence register of Stephen Keshi, coach Shuaibu Amodu also died after making complaints of chest pains. The 23rd anniversary of the day that has come to be recognized as a defining moment in the history of Nigeria's democracy and the struggle to break the grip of military rule was celebrated all over Nigeria. Now, there you go. That's mostly what kept the online community buzzing in the past week. But back to the topic of the day, I have Africa and Middle East public policy and security expert, Mukhtar Anian, who joins us from Abuja, that's Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory. Thanks for coming on the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
We also have a PhD candidate in political science, Olumuyiwa Amao, who joins us from Pretoria in South Africa.
It's a pleasure being here.
Well, let me just come back to you, Mukhtar, and ask, what would you say, or to what extent would you say the demands and agitations of the Niger Delta Avengers, is it justifiable?
Well, it's an open secret that the Niger Delta has produced billions of dollars since oil was discovered there in the late 50s and has received a pittance in terms of financial investment in its ecology, in its schooling, in its infrastructure, and everything else. So it's only natural for the people there to be extremely frustrated. If you look at the history of agitation in that region, you'll see it started with the late Isaac Dakaboro, and this was in the 60s. So agitation there is nothing new. Demands that are being made are not new either. And in my opinion, most of them are justifiable. For example, the Niger Delta has the lowest amount of potable water anywhere in the nation. Over there, even though they're right there at the Niger Delta, so with a lot of water, the acid rain in that region alone makes it impossible to even drink rainwater. So it's an ecological disaster zone. It should have been declared an ecological disaster zone decades ago, and action should have been taken. Nothing has been done. So it's understandable that the people there are extremely frustrated and are extremely unhappy and want things to be done to make things better.
People are not asking the right questions, and some of those questions should be: have they held their leaders accountable? Every time we read about how Ibori embezzled until they got tired, we haven't seen the NDA or the GLNDF or any group whatsoever asking the right questions. The only thing we have seen, which has become a recurring pattern, is when there is somebody from the north, for instance, there is agitation, and it's a very aggressive agitation from the south-south. When it's the turn of somebody from the south, as we saw in the case of Jonathan, there is an agitation from the north. So all these point to one direction, that yes, there are genuine agitations. Yes, that region has been neglected. Yes, people deserve to live better than they are now. Yes, successive governments have abandoned them. But there is more political undertone attached to most of these agitations. And for me, as long as you cannot separate politics from genuine agitations, we'll continue to have this problem. So the question we should ask ourselves is, this group of new militants, so to speak, the NDAs and the GLNDFs and all other militant groups that are rising up now, are they genuinely interested in the progress of that region, or they are agitating because someone who is in from the south-south or from the south is in the presidency, as we have seen over the last few years? So these are questions I think we should ask ourselves. But there is a general consensus, and that consensus is that that region has been abandoned for too long a time. Unfortunately, if I may add, we had a president who was from the south-south, who understood the problems his people had, who had the opportunity to change their fortunes for 5 solid years, and for 5 solid years, it's appearing as if he did nothing.
All right, Muyiwa is suggesting that these agitations are coming based on the origin of the president, who happens to be from the north. Basically, he is given a political coloration to the whole saga. Do you agree?
Well, if you look at Boko Haram as from a historical perspective, the earliest firefights, for lack of a better term, between Boko Haram and the Nigerian authorities started in 2003 in Yobe State. That was way before GJ. That was actually during the tail end of the first administration of Olusegun Obasanjo, beginning of the second. Boko Haram's issue had nothing to do with Jonathan being from the south or not being from the south. Boko Haram's issue had a lot to do with the rise of international Islamic fundamentalism, which unfortunately had its roots in Middle East going back to the 80s when Mujahideen were fighting in Afghanistan. Be that as it may, the agitation right now in the Niger Delta, from all I have been able to gather, he is correct. It's a politically motivated situation. However, it's not politically motivated because Muhammadu Buhari is from the north and is the president. It's a politically motivated power play within factions of Niger Delta militants. So what they're doing is they're using the pretext of having Muhammadu Buhari there, using the pretext of Niger Delta has been neglected as a way to consolidate their own power, so that when everything settles down, as it probably would in all likelihood in the not too distant future, those people can emerge as the new power brokers.
But moving forward now, what path do you think can be followed to end this saga? Some have suggested dialogue, while some are of the opinion that brute force should be unleashed. Where do you fall?
I don't think you can use brute force to settle a squabble between human beings and ghosts. And I say that because the Niger Delta Avengers are not operating conventional warfare. What they're doing is they operate late at night, they operate clandestinely, and they basically waging low-intensity guerrilla warfare against non-human targets. It's impossible to know who specifically is involved in every operation. So if you go in there and you start indiscriminately using the force of arms, you're going to create enemies. Now, if the government knows who the leaders behind NDA are, I personally think it's a very viable strategy to neutralize them. That's fine. That happens all around the world. But using military strategy of going after non-combatants in the Niger Delta will only bring unnecessary attention to the NDA, empower them locally, and create new enemies for the federal government. And those are not options that we should desire at any point in time. The other question about dialogue, it's, in my opinion, it's kind of difficult to dialogue with people when you don't know who they are.
All right, guys, just hold your thoughts for a second. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.